All right, you have heard what people online are talking about in the wake of Turkey shooting down a Russian plane. They're talking about World War III. To get some perspective here, we're joined by Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman. Robert, good morning to you. Thanks so much for your time.
Good morning, Paul.
Can I just very quickly ask you, Putin's response when he's talking about, this feels like a stab in the back, they are quite mild words from Putin, which to me would indicate that he realises the potential gravity of whatever his response is going to be.
Yes, I think the Russians are going to be measured. Mr. Putin made the reference stab in the back apparently refers to the fact, amongst other things, after the Su-24 was shot down, apparently according to the Turks over their airspace, but landed over the border in Syria, the Russians sent a rescue helicopter to try to retrieve the two pilots. And they certainly succeeded in one, but that helicopter was fired on by moderate forces, which the Turks support, and I think that's what he was referring to.
Yeah. What do you imagine, and it's very early days in this conflict, what do you imagine is going to happen now? Obama appears in a tentative way to be siding with Turkey.
I don't think Mr. Obama's got a lot of choice. The Turks have been warning the Russians for some time, certainly since they began their air campaign on the 30th of September, that the Russians had violated their airspace on a number of occasions. Now, this is claim and counterclaim. Also, Turkey's a member of NATO, the transatlantic, the North Atlantic organisation, treaty organisation. So I don't think Mr. Obama's got a lot of choice. But I think his statement's very interesting because he's saying the Russians should reconsider the scope of their air campaign. And on the face of it, it seems to be suggesting that the Russians should just be careful not to encroach on Turkish airspace. But he's actually saying something else. He's saying that the Russians should stop bombing the moderate forces which oppose Assad. Now, it's quite clear that the Turks are furious about the fact that about 80% of the bombs that Mr. Putin's forces are dropping on Syria are going against the moderate opposition to Assad and not ISIS. And I think what Mr. Obama is saying, look, if you only focus against ISIS, these sort of problems would be minimised.
There's still a gulf between them, isn't there? But watch this space. All right, let's talk in the broader sense, the war on terror, which does appear to have ramped up a notch. And if you look at the global threat now as described by Obama, the warning to all US citizens to think twice before making international journeys, to be careful. Where are we in this global threat? People are talking about World War III.
First of all, I don't think we've got a war against terror. We've got a struggle and a campaign against terror. I don't think we want to call it a war because that puts so much emphasis on the military side of things. It's also a political struggle. I think the reason the Americans came out with this global travel alert, the State Department, I should say, for two reasons. Firstly, ISIS has been very successful in recruiting foreign fighters, many of whom are beginning to return home, Paul. And that increases the opportunity for multiple attacks throughout the world. Secondly, I think that the Americans and everyone else is very conscious of the ability of ISIS to operate on the social media and actually prompt lone wolf attacks. That is, people who are living in a country who can just be inspired by looking at the propaganda on the internet and then carry out some sort of atrocity. So I think for all these reasons, the Americans believe the prospects for multiple attacks, particularly after the attacks in Paris, Beirut and Mali, all point to a burgeoning threat from ISIS. And ISIS is really feeling the heat. It's been on the receiving end recently of coordinated airstrikes between the Americans and the Russians. So they must be really seeking to get some sort of retaliation in.
Domestically, what is the threat level, do you think, in New Zealand? Realistically, what are the chances that there could be a terror strike in New Zealand, which is obviously one of the softest of targets?
Well, I think John Key was right when he said we're not immune for the reasons we just went through. There may be people who are, tuning into some of the propaganda and being prompted or motivated by it. But I think at the moment it remains very, very low. And it's interesting that when John Key said yesterday there were one or two people who needed 24-hour surveillance, these numbers are still relatively low in a country of 4.5 million people. So I think we've got to keep this threat in perspective, Paul. It's very important yes, we're vigilant that we protect the freedoms and our way of life in New Zealand. At the same time, we want to make sure we don't undermine those freedoms by overreacting.
Yeah, you don't want to throw away the very things you're fighting for in order to aid your fight.
Absolutely.
Just quickly on this point of this couple of suspects which are under 24-hour surveillance. Now, John Key mentioned this was physical surveillance as well as electronic surveillance. Why would you ever do that? Surely if the people are such a risk that you need to monitor them 24/7, wouldn't you lock them up?
Well, they may be building a case to do that, Paul, and it's very difficult to know from this distance exactly what's involved in that. But presumably they must have grave concerns about these individuals. They also may not want to lock them up because keeping them somewhere under surveillance could lead them to other vital links, which may be much, from an intelligence point of view, a much greater benefit than simply locking them up and then leaving the trail cold.
Absolutely, which fits in with John Key's argument that it's not the ones you can see you have to worry about, it's the ones you're not monitoring. All right, thank you so much, Robert. Always good to talk to you. Robert Patman, Otago University International Relations expert. See, it comes back to that line I was told when I was getting out of the boat in the Amazon, and I said to the guy, I've told this story so many times, but it fits into life. I said, geez, look at that crocodile there. You never have to worry about the crocodile you can see. That is not the crocodile that will kill you.